This is Pawprint, an animal rescue community, episode 96. I'm Nancy Rhee.
And I'm Harold Rhee.
Today's guest is the amazing Catherine O'Brien. Catherine is the host of The Pawcast, an animal rescue podcast based in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She features the animals and the people of Friends of the Animals, a wonderful rescue organization in Baton Rouge.
In today's episode, we talk about The Pawcast and other projects she works on through her company, Branch Out Programs. If you want to learn more about Catherine, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/96. That's the number 96.
The Pawcast just had episode 88 this week. It's been such an exciting adventure. And I have to say that the start of the podcast was not the most brave thing in the world. I have been such a lover of podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm a total podcast consumer. And like a lot of podcast consumers, I started thinking, that it just seems like people who are podcasting are having so much fun. And I would love to do that, but I was so scared. I don't really have a topic that I wanted to cover. I just really knew that I wanted to be in podcasting. I somehow wanted to get into the podcasting world. Meanwhile, I am a dog lover and I'm a volunteer and a big advocate for my favorite dog rescue group here in my community, the Friends of the Animals, Baton Rouge. And I thought finally, oh my goodness, maybe my volunteer work with dogs could be my entry into podcasting. I thought, I'm so scared to do it. I was petrified, but I convinced the executive director, Paula, to let me give it a shot. Thank goodness her son-in-law did a Saints football podcast, because I really encounter so many people who don't have any clue what a podcast is, let alone let me convince them to actually have me host one. And so anyway, I talked to Paula and I said, hey, I'd love to do a weekly podcast and feature some of the dogs that are available for adoption here at Friends of the Animals. And she said, great. And we've been going ever since.
Yeah, just such a wonderfully well done. What's great is that obviously, you can tell you put a lot of time and effort and work into it, yet at the same time, it has a very seamless feel to it. All your transitions are just so smooth and really, really work well. So,
well, that's a real compliment coming from you.
Oh, well, thanks. How many episodes before you started actually feeling comfortable doing it?
Oh, wow. I'm sure, and anybody who has done any podcasting says if they went back and listened to episode 1, it's just a cringe fest. and I think that that's probably true. I think I really got my stride probably, maybe 12 or so episodes. The first couple of episodes I scripted. I hate to say, but I totally did. It was really, in many areas of my life, I operate on the theory of version 1 is better than version none. And so, even though it took me scripting out what I was going to be saying on the podcast, it was helping me get them actually going. And now I don't do any script. Some of my listeners might not be surprised by that, but we'll just, there's that. But I really started feeling much more free, and I really try always to come from a point of happiness and fun and joy. That's what I want the podcast to be like. And so it's kind of easy to get into that frame of mind when you're dealing with the dogs. And I'll tell you a little funny story. When I first was just in the first couple of episodes, I spent a lot of time online looking up names for different colors. The reason being is that I try really to paint pictures about what the dogs look like. Sure, we with social media, we have all kinds of pictures of what the dogs look like, but I really wanted the podcast to use a lot of descriptive words. So I spent some time like all these kinds of exotic color descriptions. So I could say things like the dog has cream coat and hints of chocolate and toasted marshmallow and ochre and all these kinds of things. I was trying to come up with all these fancy terms for colors, but I sort of left that in the dust as I got more confidence.
Yeah, but I will say that that is the challenge of an audio format is is with animals. You do need to describe them, and I think you do a wonderful job.
Thanks.
Not only of their physical description, but you kind of always bring up their behavior, kind of personality types. It's very enjoyable that way.
Yeah, and just to go back a moment, that I'm trying to make it fun. I think that, and you may find this to be true as well, I think that anybody who starts getting involved in rescue work, you can hear sad stories, and that there are a lot of pushes to get involved with animal rescue coming from the point of that some of the dogs are in urgent situations or are in critical needs. And I really wanted to focus on the fun side of animal rescue, which is that dogs bring a lot of joy to my life personally. They bring a lot of companionship to my life personally. And I wanted to use the medium that we had to really convey all those things. So that's why, I'm trying to make it as a fun message as possible when we're going forward.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Now, speaking of that, but on the flip side, though, you of course are based in Baton Rouge, and it wasn't that long ago you had some massive flooding.
Yes.
So what actually caused all this flooding? Who were hardest hit? What impact did it have on Friends of the Animals Baton Rouge?
You're right. In August, the floods were just something awful. And I think the thing that caught everybody off guard in the community, and maybe I should speak more for myself, is that areas that are not known to flooded. So these were 150-year floodplains or 500-year floodplains or even 1,000-year floodplains. So no one was expecting it. The rains, it rains a lot in Baton Rouge. It rains a lot in Louisiana, but overnight we got 28 inches of rain. Now, just for comparison, you can think Los Angeles in a non-drought year gets 14 to 18 inches a year. So imagine 28 inches of rain overnight. So the floods came up, and for various reasons, some of the animals that had been strayed or people who maybe lost their homes, just so many dogs ended up in shelter situations. Also, here in Louisiana, we call a lot of states would call counties, we call them parishes. One of our neighboring parishes, they lost their shelter. The shelter actually flooded. So the animals were totally displaced. It was a really tough situation. And we just tried, the rescue group I volunteer for really tried to come in and take as many dogs as they could. A lot of the dogs that were stray animals that sort of got literally washed out of the areas where they had been strays, they were having health problems. They are heartworm positive. Heartworm is a very severe problem here in South Louisiana. And so a lot of the animals that we were coming into the rescue program might have needed a little bit of extra medical care than some of the other animals that come into the program.
Was there ever a time where it really felt like a crisis? I mean, was it manageable throughout, or?
This almost seems a little general. I think sometimes with animal rescue, it always feels like a crisis. It feels like there's always more dogs coming into into a shelter situation. It sometimes it can get a little daunting, like it's never ending. Like we never get to the point where it's all dogs have their homes. But I think that it was just sort of an extra emphasis during the flood time, and everybody does what they can. There was extra volunteers that went out to the emergency shelters for the dogs. Extra people, I think, were compelled by the floods to come, and maybe they were on a break from fostering and they reactivated and came in to foster. People came in. We had the organization had a ton of adoptions, and I don't think that they were even thinking, hey, I want to help a flood dog. It sort of coincided with a nice peak of people looking for their forever, their pet, their companion. So things are kind of working out. There's still a couple of quote flood dogs that are involved in Friends of the Animals, but they're going to be with us until they find their forever home.
Gotcha. Okay.
It was amazing how many people from across the country really reached out, not just to Friends of the Animals, but to other rescue groups in our area to say, how can we help? What can we do? So it was just the community that you tap into of the animal rescue community at large, it was amazing to see how many people really cared, and really sort of a testament to what, I think of as sort of the American spirit of helping. And that was just a really encouraging thing to see.
Yeah. And I love that you say that, because if there's one thing Nancy and I have been thinking about, like, hey, how can we try to improve the show? How can we try to, help more folks? It's that issue is that when there's a crisis, how can we mobilize? It doesn't, it's not just social media and of course phone calls and reaching out and all that, but how can we leverage, let's say, a podcast to really get the word out and really connect people with each other? So it's it's kind of a fun opportunity, but it's definitely a challenge, right? So.
Yeah, it is. That's a good way of saying it. It's fun, but it is a challenge. But I think that as each of us do what we can, we're trying to meet that challenge.
Right. As I'm listening to your podcast, would you say that there are some regular folks who tend to appear as guests on the show, or is it truly just kind of a wide range of people who you interact with?
There are some regular players. Executive Director Paula Schoen, the Executive Director of Friends of the Animals, she is frequently a guest. My husband, Bob, who is also a foster and a volunteer, he likes to come in. He's got a radio background, so he has he can turn on his radio voice to really bring the humor in and really sort of help me out as I'm podcasting. I have to say, Harold, though, there's the Dog Adoption House, which is the main program of Friends of the Animals. There are some staffers who work there, and sometimes they see me with my recorder and I can see them ducking away. They're trying to get away. They're thinking, oh, please don't ask me to talk about, I think they're just a little bit not camera shy, but recorder shy, that they might run when they see me coming. But for the most part, people are really happy to be on and talk about the dogs.
Yeah, exactly. That is wonderful. And so I guess then, now that you've been doing this, what kind of impact or what kind of changes maybe has the podcast been able to create?
This might be a little bit undog related, but as I mentioned, I was just so passionate, and still am passionate, about the medium of podcasts and what they can do. I truly think that podcasts are relationship builders. And I have to say, I know by talking to folks that for so many people, the Pawcast is the first podcast they ever listen to. I cannot tell you how many people I have to tell them what a podcast is, and that's okay. That's totally fine. And so I feel a little bit of a responsibility that I feel like I'm kind of introducing people to the world of podcasts. Most of the people who listen to the Pawcast, they come to it through Facebook. They'll hit the links that are in Facebook. And that's not how I consume my podcasts. I get my podcasts through apps or through iTunes. And it's just interesting because I know that the people who listen regularly to the podcast, they aren't the typical podcast listener. So I do try and encourage them to listen to other shows. I kind of try and drop names of other people who are podcasting. And it's like I'm trying to use the podcast as a gateway to the entire world of podcasts. So, and it's interesting because I think that's one change I can definitely put my finger on.
That's great. I mean, introducing folks to the world of podcasting, that's amazing to me. I mean, it's a gift that you're giving to folks, whether you might not think of it that way or not, but right. So
it's funny because I think I just thought, and maybe this is a little confirmation bias, but because I love podcasts so much, I thought, oh, everybody knows what a podcast is. Nope, not at all.
No. I think maybe 1 in 10 people may have heard of one, right?
Do you personally have like a podcast is a quick description for folks?
Personally, I just call it internet radio, which once again, I don't know if that's a great description, but I just call it internet radio.
Yeah.
When you put together each episode, what is sort of your formula or your format for each episode?
Well, we have 2 dogs of the week every single week. Why? because one dog just wouldn't be enough. And I really try to pick a couple of dogs. I'm a regular volunteer at Friends of the Animals. And so I try and pick a dog, especially that needs a certain highlight. Some of the dogs, they come to the rescue program and boom, applications for adoption start flowing in, especially like I think about puppies when it's puppy season, that you can barely even keep them in the program before they're adopted out. And then there's the other dogs who maybe might get a little bit overlooked, or just for whatever reason, they aren't getting the attention from the potential adopters that maybe we would want, or even especially like when the whole crew, all the volunteers, fosters, and the staff fall in love with a particular dog. And we're all looking at each other like, why isn't this, why is this dog still here in the program? And that's the kind of dog that I want to really put a spotlight on and get out in the yard, talk to their foster or talk to somebody who knows the dog, and really showcase what they're all about. So that's kind of what I do every week. And of course, our rescue group is trying to be very involved in our community. So we're out always doing activities or offsite events where we're showing off adoptable dogs. So I use the Pawcast to highlight all those current events as well.
Okay. All right. Well, turning to you, what animals or animals have inspired you?
Well, I am all about the dogs. I'm all dog all the time. I sort of semi pride myself on that. Anytime anybody sees me, they can probably spot a little bit of dog hair on my clothing as I'm walking around. No, I really love dogs so much. They are just amazing creatures. I have learned a lot about love from dogs, companionship. They really just have a special place in my life. So I love animals just in general, but I love dogs specifically. We rescued we foster failed. Let's be honest. We foster failed on our dog, Riley, and she's a Staffordshire Bull Terrier mix. She's very sweet. And when we were fostering her, we got to take her through obedience training, one of the local great program here in our community. They offer obedience training free to foster dogs. And it was just an incredible transformation for this dog and me. And it was such a bonding experience. So and it's been great for us to have her in our life. And it's just, it's fantastic. And that's why I'm so excited about rescue dogs and adoption programs, is I want everybody to have that kind of experience. It's a unique experience. Everybody has a unique experience with their dog, but it's just, I know that how much they can do for a person, a family, and their lives.
Gotcha. So at any one particular time, how many dogs do you have in the house?
Well, really, actually, we keep it to a low roar here at the O'Brien house. I know that some of the fosters, I just can't even imagine. It seems like they've got dozens and dozens of dogs, but just our Riley, she can handle one foster at a time, and she's a little bit particular. So we only get crazy with about 2 dogs at a time.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Riley plus 1 potentially, right?
Yeah. Reservation for Riley plus 1.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome.
Yes.
Let's rewind the clock just a little bit.
Sure.
Before you became a podcaster, before you became a rock star podcaster,
Nice.
maybe tell us a little about growing up. Your experience with dogs, or with what brought you to podcasting.
I have been working with professional speakers for the last couple of years. In 2010, I became involved in a group that you might know and your listeners might know, Toastmasters. And I used to be just terrified of public speaking. And Toastmasters is the world's largest public speaking organization. And when I joined Toastmasters, I kind of didn't know what I was going to be getting out of it. I just knew that it was something I wanted to just get more comfortable with, being able to speak and articulate my ideas and get up in front of people without being afraid. And when I joined Toastmasters, I met a lot of other people who had a message they wanted to share. And that sort of, I noticed that a lot of people were on a journey with their public speaking. They wanted to be able to connect with an audience and do something different. A lot of people were looking to make a big change in their life. And I started realizing that people who wanted to become professional speakers, it's sort of a long road to that destination of where they're really supporting themselves with their speaking. And I saw a niche where speakers, especially when they're getting started, might not be getting paid gigs. They're just getting the opportunity to speak, but they're not getting compensated for the speaking. And I started doing programs for these speakers. I started helping them do different content creation. I really saw that as like a niche that I could provide to help people who are speaking or getting to their speaking careers going, is helping them on, quote, the back end, develop programs and content that they could offer their audience. And that now is my business. That's what I do for people. I work with professional speakers. But I have to say that because of my love of podcasting and really because of the Pawcast, that has opened the opportunity for me to do podcasts for other people here. So now not only do I work with professional speakers, but I also am now producing podcasts for 2 other people. I do the Pawcast. I do a podcast for a local attorney who wanted to focus on mediation issues. And I just took on a new client where she is a travel blogger with a focus on solo travel. And I'm helping her start her own podcast. So really the podcast has not only been a fun way for me to help my favorite dog rescue group, but it's really provided some professional opportunity for me as well.
That's incredible. And I will tell you, I did binge listen to several episodes of the Mediation Minute.
What?
I thought it was great. Oh, it was great. Well,
Wow.
I'll tell you, I'll have to confess. When I first looked at it, first I thought it was Meditation Minute. So I'm like, what's going on? How come I can't find Catherine's podcast? So I'm looking all over Meditation Minute, and then so I'm like, oh, it's Mediation Minute. So I'm like, okay, now I'm even more intrigued because I've never heard of a podcast dedicated to the importance of professional mediation. I mean, this is like, what is this? I've never heard of this. You want to maybe talk?
Wow.
You want to maybe talk a little bit about it?
Sure. Well, and I'll tell you, you are not far off at all, because let me tell you, autocorrect constantly is saying, you don't mean mediation, you mean meditation.
Right.
And I'm like, at the end of this, I'm going to need some meditation. My goodness. So yeah, Rebecca Wispar is a local attorney and she does mediation. She's very passionate about it because it is an alternate dispute resolution method. And since you're now a binge listener of the program, you know that for a lot of people that the mediation process can preserve relationships. It keeps people out of the courtroom. It provides flexibility so people can come to a resolution that is mutually mutual. If not mutually beneficial, then mutually satisfying. That there isn't that same sort of I win, you lose. That it comes to a point where people are somewhat satisfied and can accept the results that they come away from a dispute. And now I'm a non-attorney. So although everybody jokes that by the end of doing this podcast for folks, I'll be an attorney, but that it's very interesting to hear, our audience, our target audience is attorneys, to bring in attorneys and talk about this particular type of setting where they are hearing cases with a neutral third party and really trying to come to a different agreement than to avoid litigation. It's interesting. And it's been very, I think it's been gratifying not only for the host to be able to highlight something that she really believes in, but it's also exposing a lot of the inner workings of how these cases get resolved. And, we've been featured in the local Baton Rouge business report online. And really, again, just for me, I get excited because it's exposing professionals to podcasts and the potential that podcasts have. And then also for the host, it's able to show what something that she cares about within her profession that she wants to see more of. She wants to see an improved standing of mediation.
That's incredible. Thanks for explaining that. Why do you think you enjoy this so much? I mean, what kind of gifts do you bring personally to really helping people develop their own message?
I think of myself a lot as a Jane of all trades. I'm a curious person. I'm interested in what makes people tick. And I definitely have firsthand experienced the power of podcasts, that the audio format is close. It feels intimate. It feels like you get to know people. People's personalities come out. As a consumer of podcasts, I do think of the podcasts I listen to as sort of a nice visit with friends or somebody who I would want to be friends with, or, even some of the news podcasts I listen to, you feel like you just get to know the people's perspective in a different way. It's close. And I like that a lot. I like to hear what people have to say. I like to hear what makes people tick. I like to hear how they came up with their ideas. And podcast is a place that you can do that. It's not so fast or moving on or sound bites. You can really get into things. And I don't think that, at least for me, there's nothing else that quite does it like a podcast.
Cool. Any recent episodes, any recent podcast episodes that really kind of made an impression on you?
Sometimes podcasts are hard to translate, that it does feel like an ongoing conversation, that it's hard. Sometimes it can be a little bit hard to catch people up to the conversation. Like I just told a friend about one podcast I listened to. It's called Sorry Not Sorry with Jenna Kim Jones. She's a clean comedian, and her podcast is her and her husband talking about snacks a lot, just a ton of snacks. And on its face, even right now, I'm slightly embarrassed saying that, but it's so charming. And I feel like I'm getting to go along with them on all their snack adventures. And it, like I said, it kind of doesn't translate, but when I'm listening to it, it feels like I'm at a coffee table with some friends and we're having a good time together. That's
great. No, I love that. So what's the name of the show again?
Sorry Not Sorry with Jenna Kim Jones.
Okay, Sorry Not Sorry. Yeah. I want to say that's the second time I've heard of that show. So that's cool. Okay, now I'm going to check that out.
You hear it one more time, you have to listen to it,
there
right?
You go,
that's how they, 3 times the charm.
If people wanted to look you up or look up Friends of the Animals, what's the best way to do that, whether it's website or social media?
I'd love to connect with people on social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Hello Catherine O. And Catherine is spelled Catherine. Hello, Catherine O. That's me. And you can listen to the podcast. I invite you to join us every single week. And the quick and easy way to do that is go to itsthepawcast.org. And you can catch up on all our episodes. See what all the dogs in Baton Rouge are up to.
Okay. If you could wave that magic wand and do something about animal rescue, what do you think that would be?
I will say this. I have learned a tremendous amount from being a foster, from getting involved and volunteering from a rescue. I think that sadly, before I got involved, I had a little bit of, even though I had been a dog owner for a long time, I think I was a little naive about some of the issues that dogs that are homeless dogs face in communities like mine, and I'm sure across the country. So I guess my magic wand wish would be that all of the general public would know what animals that have no home, that are going into the shelter situation, what they're facing, and not to make anybody feel guilty or anything like that, but just that it's the clear information about what the situation is. I think that knowledge would change the way so many people, the choices that people might make, that would change people's perspective. I think that just knowing the true situation of homeless animals, I think would make a big difference.
Ultimately, when it comes to whether it's the podcast, the other things you were working on in your own busy life, why do you do what you do?
I really want to be the kind of person that is really living a joy-filled life where I get to use my talents and my abilities. And that's what I'm going for. And I want everybody to be in that kind of situation where they're doing something that really uses their abilities to their fullest. And there are plenty of times where I want to, maybe I won't have all the time in the world that I would like to be able to put into the podcast, but I've made that commitment. I've made that commitment to the show. I've made that commitment to the organization. And most importantly, of course, I've made that commitment to the dogs. And I've really grown from that kind of commitment. And by doing the podcast, it's really helped me do better in other areas of my life, do better in my professional life. And so I'm just trying to keep going and do more, make the podcast as good as it can be, make it as fun and enjoyable as it can be, and really do everything I can as a volunteer for Friends of the Animals.
Well, we're talking to Catherine O'Brien. She is the host of Pawcast. That is the podcast for Friends of the Animals in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. If someone were to visit Friends of the Animals and say, Catherine, who is your most hard luck animal? I want to adopt him or her. Any animals that come to mind?
Well, at Friends of the Animals, the good news is for all of the dogs that are in Friends of the Animals program, they are rescued. That we have fosters that are with them until they are adopted, until they get into their forever homes. And that I want people to find just the right fit match for them. We always say at FOTA that at Friends of the Animals that it's all about right fit. We want to have what's best for the dog and what's best for the person. And that it's really about finding that match. So I encourage people to come out and meet dogs multiple times. It's not just to come by and pick up a dog. It really is about finding that special thing that's going to connect you with the dog that's there. And the dogs in Friends of the Animals are the lucky ones that they will be in foster care until they get adopted. We do have one long timer, and her name is Holly. She is blind. And so of course she's in a little bit of a different situation where she's needs a little bit more compassion and care. Now, I have to say, though, for being a dog that who doesn't have her sight, we've had volunteers that take her out into the yards, play with her for 20 minutes, have no clue she's blind. So she's a total, she's been in parades. She goes out to visit firefighters. She even smooched our mayor. So yeah, she is a very active dog for having no sight. But again, I know that the right person to adopt her is out there sometime, and it just requires a little bit of patience for everybody involved until that right person comes in and makes that connection at the dog adoption house, and then the forever home is sealed.
We want to say thank you to Catherine O'Brien for sharing her story. If you want to take a listen to the Pawcast or the Mediation Minute, take a look at our business branch out programs, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/96. If you want to meet me or Nancy on social media, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Look for This Is Pawprint, all one word. If you'd like to reach out to us, give us some suggestions, maybe some guests that you think we should interview, find us at thisispawprint@gmail.com. If you'd like to listen to more episodes of Pawprint, you can find us on your favorite podcast app, such as iTunes, Google Play Music, or Stitcher. Look for Pawprint Animal Rescue and make sure to hit subscribe to get the latest episodes immediately. Make sure to tune in next week when we interview Johnny Taylor and Natalie Scheffler, two high school students with an animal-oriented business that they started. And of course, thanks for your support of Pawprint. Thanks for sharing it with your friends and family. We've had listeners from all over the world, almost 120 different countries. Amazing. And remember, you spread a positive message of love and peace by saving an animal. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time on Pawprint.
Pawprint is a production of EVER Education.
You can't handle the truth.